Yeah, tonight's a personal story from me, and a personal story that hasn't been shared in the media yet, and it hasn't been shared in London. I'm going to take you back to 2008. I was flying through London in the back of black cars. I was working regularly on GMTV. I had my own series on the Discovery Health Channel. I was speaking around the world with people like Wayne Dyer and Louise Hay on I Can Do It tours. I'd just written 2 new books, and my life, after 10 years of working tirelessly to achieve my goal of raising people's confidence and self-esteem, I really felt like I'd made it. So much so that I decided that I could move back to Scotland with my daughter and go opt for a bit of life balance. So I bought a house by the sea in Scotland. It was a big house, and for the first time in a long time, I had the time to do a big creative renovation, something that used to be one of my passions. So I started to renovate the house, and at the same time, I was waiting on the results, or waiting on a phone call from a multinational that I'd been working with. I'd done a lot of work as a media rep for various big brands, and I'd been working with this one particular brand. And I put forward a £5 million proposal. I remember after 3 rounds of meetings with my agent, he said to me, "Dawn, go now and buy your house in France. You've cracked it." We were one signature away. I'll just do a quick time reference. It was now the autumn of 2008. And for the first time in the history of the multinational, they decided to decline all new untested projects. This was an absolute disaster for me. I'd moved back to Scotland. I'd put all my eggs in one basket. We really thought we had the deal in the bag. I'd sunk all my equity into my house. Self-cert mortgages were no longer an option, which meant that I couldn't withdraw my money. I had £26,000 in the bank. I had severed all my contacts in London. I'd been working at coaching schools down here. I've been working for various projects and brands. I thought I didn't need to do it anymore. 4 months later, I was cut off. I didn't know what to do next. 26 grand when you've got a lot of overheads and you're running your own business and you're faced with not knowing what to do next was a scary proposition for me. It was going to last me a few months. So what I did is I decided that I needed some clear thinking. So I headed down to my hot tub overlooking the sea with 2 bottles of wine. I went down there and I re-emerged 4 hours later. And 4 hours later I thought, you know what? Everything that I've put my mind to in my life I've achieved. I can run this project by myself. The project was basically a feminine empowerment portal. It was a project quite similar to the Dove self-esteem brand, but it was for a leading multinational brand. And I thought, I can create this portal. Mistake number 2, because number 1 was I'd put all my eggs in one basket. Mistake number 2, don't go into business when you've no idea what you're doing. 4 months later, my 26 grand was gone and I had no cash. Fast forward 24 months, after 2 miscarriages, my stepfather having a heart attack, a bill that arrived for £45,000 that was unavoidable. After 2 years, I was 100 grand in debt and I had no relationship. I wondered what the universe was doing to me. It backed me into a corner. And I was sitting there, I was moving money from account to account, trying to survive. Every month I needed to make £7,700. I was pushing so hard for business. I was working 14 hours a day. I was exhausted. I was cut off from the pulse of the universe. I was cut off from my creativity. I was cut off from my joy. I was just a machine. I became a machine doing life. I had no connection to my feelings. I had to do life to survive. I wanted to let go. And so many of us want to let go, but we are so afraid. I was so scared that if I gave in to bankruptcy, I'd lose my reputation that I'd built for 15 years. If I gave in to bankruptcy, what was going to happen to my house, my car, my daughter who was 16 years old? How could she go through the shame? How could my family go through the shame? I wanted to let go, and I resisted my truth. I resisted my truth. I knew that I couldn't run this business at this point, but I was attached to a baby that I was growing, and I didn't want to let it go. And I stood hard and tall until one day I thought, if I don't give this up, I'm going to have a stroke or a heart attack, and I'm out of here. And I can remember the moment when I picked up the phone and my hands were shaking. I called this debt company. And I explained the situation to them, and they said to me, "You don't need to go bankrupt." And I said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "You can pay this debt back over 10 years, and what we're going to do is we're going to take some very small payments off you at the front end, and we'll load it at the back end." I'd been asking the banks to do this for a year. No one would lend me money. Suddenly, I could breathe again. And I had my life back. This time I was in a different situation. So I had no credit, no extra cash. Fortunately, I had a flat that I rented out that was paying my basic overheads. For the first time in my life, I went to the government and I said, "I need tax credits to survive." I asked for support. Some of my friends came into the house and helped me renovate. I was out of energy. I was adrenally fatigued. That's what happens when you push, push, push. You become exhausted. You become depleted. So I was in this position where, I had no stress. But here I was, this life coach and this life coach trainer teaching life coaches, and I had no direction. I didn't know where I was going and what I was doing. And at first, that was so difficult for me. I'd always known where I was going and what I was doing. After 2 or 3 months, my body started to relax. And I started to get used to the idea of not doing too much. It was lovely. It was incredible. And what I did is I exchanged my vision board and my goals and all my aspirations for everything that I wanted in my life, the millions that I wanted to create, the people that I wanted to teach all over the world, the stages I wanted to speak on, the level of business that I wanted to be at. I dropped the whole thing. And I dropped into the day and the moment and the second I was breathing in. I exchanged that vision board for 5 feelings that I wanted to feel each day. I had been deprived of joy for almost 2 years. So I exchanged the vision board for the words poetry, creativity, peace, nourishment, and contentment. And they became the focus of my everydays. I started to dance, I went to yoga, I started to move the stress out of my body. And I sat in quiet contemplation in my garden overlooking the sea. And what was happening was fascinating because I thought that once I let everything go, that would be the end of me. How would I ever regain my position in the marketplace again? But we adjust. We're fascinating human beings, and we adjust. And as I started to adjust, I started to feel deep joy every day. And when the joy came in, the inspiration came back. And the first thing that came in was this idea for writing a novel. I was in the shower one morning and this idea came into my head. It was like words in my head, and I started to write when I got out of the shower. I didn't even dry myself, and I'm sitting at my laptop writing this down. And it was the idea for this novel, and it was all about the meaning of life. That novel's now been made into a screenplay. The next thing that happened with the space for the universe to come in and redirect my life was the inspiration for a program called Harmonizing. A program that I've created in the last 3 years by looking at the beauty and the wonder and the poetry of nature and life. I really believe that as human beings we have become denatured. We are cut off from the creativity. We are cut off from the poetry of life. We've become systematic, systemized beings. We're looking for certainty. We're looking for predictability. We want to oh my God, that's 10 minutes. We absolutely want to know where our lives are going, the pensions that we'll get at the end of the day, the money that we're going to have in the bank. We get bigger and bigger houses, bigger cars. We're more and more ambitious, aspiring, and the joy and the presence and the wonder of life is there. And so many of us are missing it. So I couldn't believe the fact that I was watching myself. I became the conscious observer of my life. And I saw that, like the seed of a flower, before it's even, if I had a tiny little seed here, and we looked at this seed, this little ugly, wrinkly seed, I find it so fascinating that within that, before it's even planted in the soil, it contains the colour, the fragrance, the patterns, the wonder of the full potential of that fully blossomed flower. I believe that if we created the space to disconnect a little bit from the matrix of our ambitions and the lifestyles that so many of us have bought into, the aspirations, if we created the space, that just like the flower, each of us are coded with a blueprint, a soul signature, if you like. And when we create the space, the universe can come in and it can begin to guide and redirect our lives and lead us effortlessly to where we're meant to be. I spend a lot of time in my garden these days. And I watch these little plants, and nature is constantly in chaos. And the reality of our own lives is life is chaotic. As human beings, we're trying to make straight lines. We're trying to predict everything. We try to have everything we want when we want it. When I look at these little flowers in the garden, I see them grow, and I see them accept the winds as the winds push them and bend them. I see them accept the sunrise in the morning and the sun going down in the evening. I see them let go their beautiful petals, dropping them to the ground, never becoming attached. I see them evolving naturally and organically, never pushing to be somewhere beyond where they actually are. And I really believe that we have got so much to learn from nature. At one point, you were a single cell in your mother's womb, a tiny, tiny cell, and you grew inside that womb for 9 months, most of you. And as you grew, there was no external influence. Nature grew you. Why would you think that once you arrived out of the womb, it would stop being there for you? Nature will guide us. We don't need to push so hard. We don't need to exhaust ourselves. I feel now my soul journey has been redirected. I was derailed. And from the dirty, stinky, smelly compost of my endings, amazing new beginnings have been created. Nature is chaotic. Nature doesn't hold on. Nature embraces beginnings and endings. It embraces cycles. For so many of us, our hearts and our souls will be calling us to let go. And I feel that now my role, my gift to humanity is to take the voice of creation and ask you to get in touch with your soul signature and to step up and take your place in what can potentially be a thriving humanity if you take the leap. I think I'm out of time. Thank you.